Good afternoon and welcome to today's meeting of the United Policyholders Wildfire Risk Reduction and Asset Protection Working Group. This working group is under an initiative that we founded. Our WRAP initiative recognized that as California property owners were losing their insurance, and as unprecedented marketplace conditions were making it harder and harder for people to comparison shop in the market and get a replacement policy when they were non-renewed. We undertook to try to find some solutions to the situation. And this journey has been a very interesting one. And we have established many partners that have similar goals of helping people be able to keep their assets protected. And we've embraced a whole related work stream around the how critical it is that we increase risk reduction, both at the individual home level, businesses, and also community-wide. So what started as an effort to try to help people shop for insurance in a really challenging market really has morphed into a very robust mitigation focused work stream as well. The two are joined because in our efforts to try to help markets reopen in California so that people would again be able to shop and compare, would again enjoy the benefits of competition, would again be able to keep their properties insured at a price that was manageable for the household. That it's the mitigation work is critical, and we're not going to get where we need to go without increasing mitigation. And in order to increase mitigation, we need to increase incentives and rewards. So all of that is now part of our mission here and in the WRAP working group. So I want to thank everyone who took the time to be with us today. The agenda is in the chat. I'm just going to share it for a split second. There we go. And we are still in the introductions. We don't have Emily Rogan with us today. She's normally my co-pilot here. We've got Ben Laturno in that seat. And what we're going to do today, we're going to hear very briefly from Yana Valacovic, who is the county director and forest advisor for the University of California Cooperative Extension. Yana has been part of our WRAP working group from the early days when we were before IBHS put out their wildfire prepared home standards, before the Safer from Wildfires rules were put into place, and when our working group actually came up with our own list. And Yana was part of that process. So Yana's got a lot going on. We both sit on the advisory panel that's working toward building a public wildfire model here in California to try to bring a level setting to predictive models and how they affect what insurers charge. And she shared yesterday that something that a lot of you may have been looking at or wondering about is we actually had somebody present on this many years ago. When is the California Board of Forestry going to clarify the rules around Zone 0? So I asked Yana to just give us a little quick update, given that Governor Newsom recently made an announcement that now really opens up that process. And go ahead, Yana. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Yana Valacovic, and I have been involved, as Amy said, with WRAP, as well as a whole range of strategies related to fire mitigations, both as a researcher and as an educator and someone who works in policy. And I just want to bring forward that there are many strategies to fire mitigation, and there are many dials to turn. And the one that I'm highlighting today is really about addressing the missing ingredient in the home protection space related to ember exposure and flammables and combustibles near to buildings. And so in 2020, the legislature and the governor signed AB 3074, which created by policy, a new zone in defensible space, which has been termed Zone Zero. So it reflects the first 5 feet around any building and attached decks or stairs. And that work basically, once the legislation was passed, triggered the California Board of Forestry and Fire Protection to develop the enabling regulations because they are responsible for that element in the Public Resources Code. The board made great work, and many of you may have been following that. And then we're asked to take a pause, and the governor, by executive order following the LA wildfires, basically released the board to finish that work. And so it's exciting times, but they've got a short timeline to get that product across the finish lines, and they are actively seeking engagement from stakeholders such as yourselves and experts who may have something to say and contribute to help really refine what California's minimum standards will be for Zone Zero. Doesn't mean that a local entity can't go a higher standard, but this is really about establishing the minimum standards. So I'm going to put into the chat the link to the California Board of Forestry and Fire Protection, and there is it's a big website. On the lower right-hand corner is the announcement for the first meeting, which is going to be March 4th from 1 to 4 p.m. It is in person with a virtual option, and this will basically be an opportunity for a new board to kind of take up that work. And there'll be a variety of presentations related to what have we learned from LA? What have we learned from some of these other wildfires? How does Zone Zero fit into this? What was the working group's effort with the California Board of Forestry and Fire Protection to date? And kind of where does the board want to take it from here? And the meeting is designed to have a lot of public engagement and public input. So know that your voice will be heard, and they're very interested in all of this. But they are under a deadline from the governor, so it will be a rather expedited process.
So thank you, Yana. And I did go on myself to see how easy it would be to find the details. What I found showed that there's a meeting that morning from 9 to 4, but is that not a public meeting?
So the 1 to 4 is a public meeting. I think more materials will be released this afternoon, but on the lower right-hand corner, it says Zone Zero Work Group. And I guess I could share screen if I have it. Let me get it located, and I can.
That's okay. That's all right. I think well,
lower right-hand corner, Board of Forestry and Fire Protection Zone Zero Work Group workshop.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. I'm sure it's going to be rolled out. No problem. It's going to be smooth as silk. All right. But actually, I don't mean to make light of it. It's obviously it's a very important step, and I understand that. And it's something that has been in limbo, and now we just have to make sure that our firefighting friends and stay popular in their communities as they have to enforce that. So thank you so much.
It takes the burden away from locals, though, because it makes it clear that this is the state standards. And it's already, into the Safer from Wildfire program, and it's already into IBHS's Wildfire Prepared Home. So it isn't new in that way. It's really just providing those fine point details that people have been waiting for.
Okay, thank you so much, and for all the work that you're doing in academia and also in the regulatory world and being part of our efforts for all these years. So I'm very, very proud to welcome our next guest speaker. Probably a lot of you already know about Nancy Watkins and the work that she's doing with her company Milliman on lots of different fronts. And if you can Google her. She's got lots and lots of published writings on the internet, and she is along with us very, very focused on helping us restore our insurance market here in California, and also just in general helping us advance our shared goal of facilitating risk reduction, but also facilitating insurance companies' recognition of risk reduction, and ability to write more homes in areas where they have been pulling out, by giving them more data, more information about the mitigation efforts that are underway in those areas. So I want to welcome Nancy. She's a principal and consulting actuary with Milliman. She is going to be talking about the WUI Data Commons today, an initiative that's aimed at creating a centralized repository of data related to wildland urban interface areas and related coordination with insurers. And she is coming to us from Florida, where she is attending a conference that's hosted by the Reinsurance Association of America, which is those of you who are either getting into understanding the insurance industry or already in there. The reinsurance sector is, I sometimes say reinsurers are kind of the puppet masters behind the scenes here, because what they charge for reinsurance to their clients and how they see wildfire risk is very much influencing the consumer experience on the ground. What people's options are, what they are paying. A lot of that is being determined by how insurance reinsurers are functioning, what they are charging their insurance company clients, and what kind of limitations they are putting in the treaties that they enter into with their insurance clients, about, for example, homes that have a risk score above a certain amount. So reinsurers are having a very heavy hand in affecting the options that are being offered in the market. So that's unrelated to Nancy's direct presentation, but that gives you a little bit of context with how influential she is in the work that she's doing, that a lot of people listen to Nancy, and now we're going to get to listen to Nancy. So welcome, Nancy. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Amy. That was a really nice build up, and I'm kind of sad it might be like all downhill from here, but I'll do my best.
Uh,
First, I want to see if you guys can see my screen. Yes?
yes.
All right, great. That's so far so good. Slideshow. Let me move my little bar. Okay. All right, so I have a bunch of slides, which I sent Amy a PDF of them so that you'll have them all to leave behind. So I'm going to go through pretty high level and not like touch on every single point, but I want to leave time at the end for open discussion from the group. But first, thank you guys for having me here today. I think it's really important, the work that you're doing, to be integrated. The things that Yana and Amy have said so far just make me feel like I'm in the right place and hopefully at the right time. What I want to talk about first is just the need for alignment and bringing in really some of the themes that you just set up, and then get into why data commons is even a thing. What does that have to do with alignment, and how does it even solve our problems? And tell you where we are on this initiative that we're working on, with time at the end for questions. In general, I got started with this because I'm an expert on how insurance markets fall apart and how to put them back together again, and because I'm a California resident and I was looking for ways to get our little Humpty Dumpty market back on that wall. And I found my way to the fire service and found out that a lot of the things that they are interested in are things that we are interested in. And so I worked with a bunch of fire chiefs, and just want to make sure, can you see the whole slide, or just is there like a little blank space? Oh, okay, whole slide, good, great. So we're trying to answer questions that get to Amy's point about the reinsurance market and the modelers that kind of serve as the currency or the metric for how insurance is managed and measured and underwritten and priced and reinsured. Um, and just why is there such a disconnect between what people are doing, what the fire service wants them to do, what the insurance industry is doing on the back end as far as pricing, and in the middle, what the modelers are doing. And so I just as Amy set us up with today, I am firmly of the belief that there is no sustainability of our market if cities keep burning down. And the only way to stop communities from burning down is to do things like implement the Safer from Wildfires framework, including Zone Zero. Thank you, Yana. And make it an aligned process where everyone's talking about the same thing. If you give people confusing and inconsistent rules, they'll pick the rule that they want to pick, which is probably going to be doing the least. And that's why a state ordinance matters, and local enforcement doesn't work. But you have to have the insurance enforce it as well. And so what I've been working on is how to get those actions at the home level, the community level, and outside the community, how to get that into the models used by insurers. Yana and I both served on a CAL FIRE risk modeling advisory work group. There was folks from CDI, communities, a lot of fire service people. And if you don't have a copy of this report, I encourage you to read it. It's the first thing I've ever seen that talks about the challenges between community mitigation and modeling. And one thing that came out of that is that we need to be aligned as an ecosystem. And one of the elements of alignment is better data for everyone to use for your own purposes, and to provide a more common understanding of the current status of mitigation. So if we had that kind of data, we are talking about like this entire ecosystem working better in terms of measuring, communicating, and mitigating risk. Measuring is where we're talking about collecting information and establishing standards that are common, like a Zone Zero standard. Communicating, sending risk signals through not only insurance pricing and underwriting, but also fire protection, building codes, land use, HOA agreements, and then actually doing the mitigation, which is quite hard, but knowing which mitigations make the most difference in terms of risk reduction, that gets back into measurement. And we start having a cycle of improvement where things start looking and feeling more consistent and people do what they should do. So that brings us to the data commons. What do I mean by that? We're talking about collecting parcel level and community level data from multiple sources and anonymizing it where it should be anonymized to protect privacy, but to keep it the access controlled, and then provide access to people who need it. And I'll give some more information about what all that means, but essentially we're not trying to take over any data collection efforts that currently exist. We're trying to give them a common place to go, so that if CAL FIRE has done a bunch of work, it's not all just in a spreadsheet. It's in a place in a digestible form that CAP modelers will know about it, and insurance companies will know about it. We want the public modelers to know about it. I mean, there's no way to build a public model that includes home hardening and defensible space if somebody isn't going around and doing those inspections and making them available at scale to the people building the public model. So it's not only for the private models, it's also for the goal that you all are trying to achieve of having a proper public model as well. We are a couple of years into this plan. I completed a first phase with IBHS back last year, and started the second phase, which United Policyholders has been an active participant in, which is almost wrapping up now. We are moving into a third phase, hopefully in 2025. Everybody, if you have any wood, please knock on it. And future phases will allow the permanent establishment, if successful, of a WUI Data Commons. So I'm going to give you more information about each of those phases. In phase one, IBHS engaged Milliman to survey 5 major insurers that represented, almost 40% of market share in California, 2 of the largest reinsurers, the 3 largest wildfire catastrophe model vendors, and the CDI. We also created a draft data spec. We built out like all the different things that you would think about if you were inspecting a home, really focusing on wildfire, not like water leaks or anything like that. We created a draft data spec, and we did a very involved survey of all of our participants and collected all the results to find out what the survey participants thought was important and what they didn't have. What we found, so this was a demonstration of value. Was this valuable or not? And what we found is everyone said that there were gaps in wildfire risk data. Everyone said that if we could get this data from the WUI Data Commons, they would use it. All the reinsurers, the insurers, and the cat modelers would use this data, and it would reduce their uncertainties around wildfire risk. In the insurance world, when uncertainty goes down, you can change the risk load and make it go lower up to a certain point, and you can write more up to a certain point. So not an unlimited amount, but less uncertain is definitely better for affordability and availability. And we had a few companies that were interested in being part of a pilot. I've given you links that give you this public report. Everything we do, we try to make it public at the end, and a webinar that explains the concept in more detail. Phase two, we were committed to engaging outside of the insurance industry. So we've been working through, well, I'll talk about like all the meetings that we've done, but the point of this was to try to figure out who's going to host this entity, because it has to be hosted by trusted organizations or else people won't want to be involved. Try to make recommendations about any existing host entities, what kind of requirements we would need to build a prototype commons, and then document the goals and success criteria. Once again, to have a written plan for a pilot build that could be published and made available, and then lay the groundwork for phase 3. So what we've done, starting in July, funded by the Moore Foundation and operating through California Fire Chiefs Association, we held 6 Blitz sessions and probably had about 100 subject matter experts, including Amy and some of her staff, and Yana has come to some of those, where we talked about some of the issues about data and privacy, what uses would be okay, what would people not support. I also drilled down very deeply with cat modelers and had one-on-one interviews with 5 different modelers. And we've had dozens of meetings with, 1 company here, 5 companies there, legislators, regulators, a lot of different people, really just to try to get a holistic view of of what's the best way to make this happen, and with the most benefit to the most people. So we came up with primary use cases, priorities. We tried to deal with some of the critical objections that we encountered up front. And we figured out who we should align with to make this more than just about data, because just collecting data doesn't have enough. It might benefit the insurance industry, but it doesn't really benefit anybody else. So we were trying to look for ways to make this a win-win for our partners. So our critical use cases that we came up with were 3. One focused on communities, one focused on IBHS, wildfire prepared neighborhood, and one focused on catastrophe models. With respect to the communities, we understand that there are some communities like Marin that have really robust data and a kind of centralized collection method, but that's not true for most communities. And so for some of the others, most of the others who don't have the kind of resources to be able to do parcel level inspections and then augment those with community level information would help them make better plans, prioritize what kind of mitigations they should be pursuing, figure out where they had succeeded, where they have not, put together robust data for grant proposals. And I'm really hoping the state can start asking for inspection data before and after as kind of demonstration that grants have been achieved. Making sure that resources are properly staged, trying to keep our firefighters safer, and bringing more resources to those that cannot afford to do the mitigations but need to do them. And also, to the extent that there's new ordinances, to have data that helps hold residents accountable, because compliance is going to be a really big deal going forward. I don't think it's realistic to expect people to voluntarily do things or do them just because there's a little insurance discount. I think we need to be messaging effectively and consistently, and also driving down the cost of data collection. The second, I'm not going to go into detail about this, but IBHS is, they've already got a wildfire prepared home designation. I'm assuming you guys are all familiar with that. They are rolling out their wildfire prepared neighborhood designation now. And when they do roll this out, they will need parcel level inspection data, as well as some of the community variables that, that we proposed to be building into the data commons. There's no way to evaluate like a 100-house neighborhood as to whether they're compliant with IBHS's new standards without understanding what's in zone 0, what's under their decks, do they have ember screens, and that means parcel level inspections. So we want to work with IBHS when they roll out their standards. We want to have a ground game that communities can rely on that has this kind of technology, this kind of data specification, and even a process and a place so that they can efficiently try to go through this designation process. And we don't wait for IBHS to try to figure all this out one by one. They've actually endorsed the Data Commons too, as well as CAL FIRE, and so is the Little Hoover Commission. The third thing is the CDI Sustainable Insurance Strategy required that for catastrophe models used in pricing, that they consider risk mitigation at property, community, and landscape scales. And they even built in risk mitigation from prescribed fire and utility companies. Just to reiterate, this data does not exist in any usable form across California. It might, little pieces of it might exist in some places, but to expect insurance companies and cap modelers to trick or treat for data is not, it's not efficient. It won't happen at anywhere near the kind of speed that we need to bend down the risk curve. So we're trying to make it really efficient for the modelers to comply with that regulation and for the insurance companies to use the data too. The more the data gets used by the same data gets used by different people, the lower the cost will be, and the more frequently you can keep doing inspections to keep the validity up. Colorado is right behind California with draft legislation that's even asking for state level activities, including the purchase of firefighting equipment. So where's that data going to come from? This is another place that we're hoping to fill the, we see that there's an enormous amount of pressure on modelers and insurers to do this. We want to make it possible for them to do this. But in order to do that, we need the cooperation of the communities. And that's where I think United Policyholders and the WRAP program might be able to help. There's a fourth use case, which is insurer pricing and underwriting. I really want to work with the insurers to understand what they would use this data for. I feel like the first three are easier to spec. And the fourth, I think we want to work out in our pilot phase 3. But there's a lot of different things I think they might want to be able to do. So what do I mean by phase 3? First, we want to try to use on the ground inspection technology. So I'm not talking about drones or satellites or anything that flies around in the air. I'm talking about people with cameras usually, or cell phones with cameras, going around the perimeter of a house, not a drive-by, so that they can inspect zone zero. They can look at the detailed things that are going to be informing the actual risk of spread of fire from house to house. That there are vendors already out there using AI technology and other, fancy schmancy tech. I'm not a tech person. And we want to work with IBHS, the Western Fire Chiefs Association, and our insurance company pilots to establish which vendors, and I'd like to have multiple vendors, so this is a competitive situation that encourages more investment in this space, and rewards entities that have already kind of put the time in to make this possible. But if they can meet the data spec that we develop with IBHS and the Western Fire Chiefs Association, and the insurance companies believe that they can rely on this data for underwriting and pricing, I mean, maybe we could get to a point where homeowners could install apps on their cell phone. Maybe not to underwrite a, I don't know, $3 million house, but what about if it's a renewal and you just have to show that you still maintained your defensible space? I mean, there's ways for this to not cost $150 a pop. For it to happen once a year and not once every 10 years. We want to also, I don't think we're going to be sourcing any new community level mitigation. There's so many sources already. CAL FIRE, the government's, California governor's wildfire and science technology commons. We have an arrangement with them. They really want us, this is the UCSD effort, if y'all are familiar with that. They really want us to find more use cases for their data. I'll show you some other data we've got from Western Fire Chiefs Association on firefighting capabilities. We're going to standardize that using a platform that already exists. It got built by a group called Catastrophe Resiliency Council that I've been working with. Then we're going to have to figure out what access and what controls we need to do the job and protect consumer privacy. Because I understand it's going to be a problem if we just say, oh, we'll put all this data in one place and people can use it for whatever they want. So obviously that's not going to work. We're going to be looking for help to, to find appropriate access. And then we want to leverage the relationships we have with groups that are already trying to do something in this space to amplify what they're doing and have them amplify what we're doing. And then lay the groundwork so that after the pilot is done, we have a self-sustaining thing that pays for itself and it's well managed. So who's participating? Western Fire Chiefs Association. This is all tentative. This is all subject to funding and the details being written down exactly right. But Western Fire Chiefs Association is our main group that we want to work with. They would coordinate with Cal Chiefs, Metro Fire Chiefs, and the IAFC to do pilots. We're looking at maybe 30 in California, 20 in 4 or 5 other Western states, and a neighborhood being like 100 homes. So we're really looking to prioritize neighborhoods who already have mitigations in place or they show willingness to implement mitigation makeovers. This is my job, is to come up with fun names for things in accordance with WUI best practices. We're also going to try to prioritize neighborhoods close to the edge of communities that if they reduce their risk, that it also helps the rest of the community. For IBHS, I think they're looking at maybe 5 to 10 neighborhoods in the next year or two. And that's not going to be all those 50, but if there's some subset of the 50 that qualify, or maybe IBHS picks their own pilots, we just want to be their data collector. That's all. And we have an agreement from them to work together. I have at least 3 modelers, probably more like 5, who are eager to be participants in this and potential buyers of the data down the road. I have 2 carriers I can announce. One is Chubb, one is Mercury. I am wooing other ones, but cannot announce them. And I'm hoping to get 3 to 5 total carriers on phase 3 to really say, yes, I'll rely on this. No, I won't rely on that. This is how much data we need, et cetera, et cetera. I'm talking to a lot of government entities, NAIC. Colorado Insurance Commissioner has already said he wants to be involved in this. CDI, I'm hoping will be involved. They got their hands full right now. I would love it if United Policyholders participated. Environmental Defense Fund, I think, is interested in organizing insurability fairs, another Nancyism, something like a job fair where you drop your resume on a card table. It doesn't mean somebody offers you a job on the spot, but it does mean you get some visibility. We want these mitigation makeovers to be able to put insurance companies together with communities that have done the work and start showing success stories. Insurance companies want success stories too. We're just trying to make it easier for them to say yes. And I have a utility committed already. Edison wants to work with us. They think they can bring on other utilities to help provide their data on what they've been doing and then incorporate our output so that they'll do a better job of risk reduction. So you see where I'm trying to align this data thing with other things that are also very, very important to achieve our collective goals. So to like sort of speed through some of this, our data spec from the phase 1 report really is going to be our starting point. So we're not starting from ground zero. As I said, Western Fire Chiefs Association hired Milliman with a grant by the Gordon Betty Moore Foundation to create WUI fire protection scores. So we are in the process of gathering data from every fire battalion in California on their equipment, their training, their mutual aid agreements and who they're with and how far away those entities are. And we're going to create a score for every battalion in California and then the West. We also want to license this data to the CAP modelers. And I think even some of the big insurance companies are going to want to use this because they don't know how to distinguish communities with better firefighting capabilities with respect to wildfire. They understand normal house fires, but they don't understand, they don't have the data of firefighting equipment and capabilities for wildfire. Just a fancy technology stack thing. This is the Catastrophe Resiliency Council. They're a nonprofit, part of the Insurance Information Institute family. And their whole purpose is to better understand catastrophe risk. They have associate members that are like Fannie Mae and the NAIC and FEMA. We're a member. So it's a very public-private organization. And so we're going to use their technology that they're just finishing up to control access and have the data standardized for modeling. So this means it doesn't have to all be paid for. We just have to tap into what they've done. The fire service is going to serve as our lead partners in terms of really managing the mitigation makeovers. And if we move out of the pilot into a permanent situation, I'd hope to have the Western Fire Chiefs Association permanently funded as part of that. To keep going, a big challenge will be continuing to do parcel level inspections. And so encouraging local fire services to collect this data, put it in the data commons, and use the standardized reports that we will give them in order to better plan and manage their own community mitigation makeovers. Insurance and modelers, I've already talked about what we wanted them to do. Really, we want them to say what data they need. And then I want to investigate the feasibility of insurers contributing future inspection data. I couldn't start that way because it would never start. But if we have communities collecting parcel level inspection data and insurers putting their own inspection data in, it'll be a richer data set. So we'll have to see if that works or not. Now, United policyholders, what can you guys do? I think that's going to be up to you if you're interested. You understand your interests and capabilities more than I do. So if you are willing, I would ask at some point that we get a letter of support maybe in the next month or so. And I'm very open to incentives to enable public acceptance of inspections. Nobody wants inspections just for the fun of it. But believe me, it's not data if it's self-reported and biased. So insurance companies won't use it, and we need them to use it. So that will be part of the process. And so I'm looking for trusted groups, if you think it's to the benefit of consumers, to help figure out how that all works. So next steps, I'm doing this socializing thing, getting letters of support. We'll publish phase 2 hopefully in March. I've got 2 or 3 entities that are looking at funding us right now for the data commons itself, the coordination, and then a separate thing for mitigation makeovers. So no promises, but that's where we are. So I will stop and answer questions.
Terrific, Nancy. Thank you so much. I know I speak for this entire group when I say it's really your energy is inspiring. The strategic approach that you are using to engaging insurers and reinsurers in this project is obviously very important. You know, we was telling you in our own kind of organic way through this working group, we've done our best to bring some insurers in. We had Karen Collins speak to us. We had Danielle Kagan from CSAA, and then Charles Tumney from Mercury come. And as a result of 2 out of those 3, we saw something concrete happen that benefited some community members. So we're all for the collaboration, coordination. I'm fairly confident we can get you a support letter. You know, I've talked about, and this is a good, I'm sure my staff will appreciate me reminding everybody on the call, if you are in a community that has started any kind of a new program, any kind of technical support, grants, and you haven't sent information to us to put in our RAP Resource Center, please do that, because you know what I kind of pitched to Nancy is, hey, we got funding from the Governor's Office of Emergency Services here in California to build the risk reduction, the RAP Resource Center. We had 2 one retired firefighter and then 1 retired smoke jumper build it for us. So, it was built by inside people that really understand the dynamics here. And it's a vehicle, it's a vessel. So make sure that if you have any updates for us to put in the library, that you email them to Ben Letourneau. He can put his email in the chat right now. So that's number 1. Number 2, back to your presentation. Let's see.
I can start answering some of the questions if you want me to just take it from the top.
You can, if you can parse and find.
Yeah, I can parse.
Normally I just read them out, the ones that are actual questions.
Yep. So I think there's a question about the Fireside app. I think Amber just mentioned that's being used. And Fireside has been part of our discussions, and I presume if they're interested in being a data collector, they'd have to comply with the specs, which will be developed by IBHS and the Western Fire Chiefs Association. But I'm hoping that the popular inspection technology vendors will do the we'll be able to provide the data that we want. Like we don't have to start from nowhere. We have to start from where we are. So I'm sure we'll be looking at multiple vendors, and I'm definitely aware of them. But the data spec is going to need to be the thing that drives the thing and not who the vendors are, because that's pretty important to be able to standardize. How this impacts rural North State counties, I am not sure. If by rural you mean you don't have a lot of houses in one place, like if you have, you know, some dense communities in a rural county, then I think you are looking at urban conflagration risk. If you don't, and the houses are really, really far apart, this data commons, I mean, maybe would apply to you, but probably not. I mean, most likely, as I understand it, defensible space around your house is everything. You're not going to see houses burning each other down if they're not even close together. It's houses that are close together that become the fuel in an urban conflagration. That's what we're trying to deal with. And that's why it's not only about defensible space around the house. It's about a combination of what's happening around the house community. VHS wildfire prepared designation differ from NFPA Firewise. They're really not the same at all. Firewise, as I understand it, is more just an organization for volunteers to do things, whereas IBHS wildfire prepared designation is going to be based on what was done according to very, very strict and specific recommendations and standards that IBHS is laying down. So
Yeah,
there,
I gotta put a pause in here. So our last meeting, first of all, we had invited Ian Giamonico, probably
yeah,
just butchered his name, to be a presenter about the IBHS Wildfire Prepared Community Standard, and he said, "Well, we're about 2 years out from having that done." And we had the Firewise gal present. She was our last meeting speaker, and you know, I kind of I can't help but ask, like, it seems like you might be sort of under appreciating what their important role right now, Firewise, that they are the only indicia. You know, I mean, we've got IBHS and Safer from Wildfires. You know, we have a question in here about some, you know, rewarding people for something versus, you know, better than nothing. And IBHS takes that very strong view that it has to be everything. So I guess I want to just poke at you a little bit about what you said about Firewise, because it is kind of one of the few things we've got to you know, that in our quiver to get insurers into a community.
right. Okay, so my husband is our Firewise captain on our street, and he he maintains a list of neighbors, and I mean, he takes our safety very seriously. I mean, he's pretty committed to doing it. Um, there are a lot of people who don't even respond to emails, but they still get the Firewise designation because some of the people on the street have done some work. So I'm not saying that Firewise isn't important, and so the way that I answered the question was too fast and it wasn't right. It's a great group for promoting, for organizing volunteers and promoting people doing the right thing. But the right thing has lots and lots of different forms in different situations. And you don't actually have to demonstrate or prove or get inspections about what you've done. Like if you have a clear zone 0 or not a clear zone 0, no one knows. If you have ember screens or not ember screens, like that's not like demonstrated mitigations. It's like the difference between, you know, actual weightlifting things that you did versus being a member of a health club. Like there's a real correlation, but it's not the same. And so IBHS is putting down specific metrics for wildfire prepared home and wildfire prepared neighborhood. And I will say, I think that modelers and insurers are going to come up with their own metrics, and they might be looser than IBHS's, or maybe they'll be tighter. I don't know. But I do think that if we have the data, then an insurance company or a modeler that doesn't actually agree with IBHS can use that data and come up with their own. I mean, the reality is, how many wildfire prepared neighborhoods are we going to have in 2, 3 years? Like, not a huge number, right? And everybody is going to have to get evaluated for insurance. So somehow or other, insurance companies are going to have to figure out what's the risk level relative in that no group that is not able to say yes, wildfire prepared neighborhood. So I definitely hope that NFPA will help promote inspections, and I don't know if they will or not. It would be great if they did, but they're just not the same. I mean, they're both good, but they're not the same as what IBHS is doing.
Understood. Understood. I feel, I feel we need both. I feel like we got to
Yeah,
have, kind of like, a lot of people said, oh, we ended up with two standards here, safer from wildfires and IBHS, which is it? And I'm like, well, they're almost exactly the same.
yeah,
And I think, obviously the state is trying to take a little bit of a more human approach of like, okay, we want people to be rewarded for each thing. It's, something. I think, insurers would really prefer the all or nothing approach. But again, we're just trying to keep this thing moving forward, right?
me
Uh,
too. Yeah,
but
I actually don't prefer all or nothing.
I,
I really don't, because like when you make a standard, just by definition, it has to be sort of generic. And insurance companies can be more specialized in how they look at things. And that's okay, because if there's a price variation, if there's differences in how they perceive risk, there's going to be a lowest. And we could pick the lowest, and that's good. That makes more affordability. A couple of people want me to publish something, and yes, I will. Phase 1 is published. Phase 2 will be published, hopefully in a month. I
are you
should,
good for us to share the deck from today?
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I sent you a PDF so you could.
Yep, yep, yep. Quick point
Who's
of
gonna
you
get
can
paid?
you can keep looking at those questions. I have a moderator privilege question.
Yeah.
ISO protection class. We got a question from one of our working group members who's a fire department official. Um, is that, I mean, I know that was a traditional way that insurers were evaluating the firefighting capacity of a community is by putting a number on their fire department, full-time, volunteer, how many engines, that sort of thing. Is ISO protection class still an important indicia?
I think ISO protection class is important for one house at a time burning down. It has things like distance to fire station, distance to fire hydrant, capacity of fire hydrants. Anyone who paid attention to the LA fires understands that maybe that did not really make as anywhere near as big as difference as, you know, how well coordinated were all the fire services that were supposed to be responding to this fire? Were there multiple fires at the same time or just one? And, you know, the the Western Fire Chiefs Association, and Dave Winokur, who a lot of y'all might have seen him speak. Is actually his idea, and Western is our kind of main client in this WUI fire protection score. They designed, what is the information that should be collected for wildfire firefighting, which isn't the same as firefighting one house. It's just, I mean, it's like the difference between you know a little rain falling someplace and a tidal wave. Like you, you just don't have the same response and mitigation and fire suppression. The training that like bulldozers, helicopters, that is not a thing. Water tenders, that they aren't using those things in fighting one house at a time in the middle of a city, but those are really important for wildfire.
Right.
Let's see. Got a couple thank yous. You're welcome. That's a good question. I love that question. Can we anticipate partial credit from insurance companies for taking some action, but not everything? Something is better than nothing. So it's interesting. What I've heard, okay, so what I've heard is that there are like 3 or 4 things that make up most of it, and that's the 6-inch. Yana can fact check me. The 6-inch non-combustible space at the base of a house, Class A roof, Zone 0 clear, nothing burnable in Zone 0, and ember screens. And I think that it's likely that that if all 4 of those things were really, really done, that an insurance company might consider that to be significant, even if it doesn't go all the way to IBHS wildfire prepared home. But if we're talking about just doing one of those things and not doing any of the others, frankly, the fire chiefs tell me you have not reduced your risk. And so from an actuarial perspective, there's no justification for giving any discount. The only reason that companies did file those discounts is because the CDI told them to. And so the reality is it's fooling people to think, well, it's sort of giving them a little tiny incentive to give them a little tiny credit, but the actual actuarially sound credit is 0. So you still sometimes do things that aren't actuarial because you're nudging people in the right direction. But frankly, we need to get past, and not to attack the questioner, but there's a real mindset in the US that somehow everything that you do to protect your home has to be cost benefit justified because you got a premium discount. But what's the difference between I get quoted by 5 insurance companies or I get a fair plan policy? Who cares if I got a discount? I want the 5 insurance companies to quote me so I don't have to go into the fair plan. Like, how do you, like that's a real reason, insurance reason to do these things. And the more important reason is because we don't want to end up like Palisades. My town, Orinda, I wouldn't, our real estate values would probably go up if we were safer, but people are so focused on keeping all the vegetation and everything because they're thinking their real estate values will go down. I worry that the whole community is going to burn up because we're arguing about why we don't have to do things. And even if my house stays and if the whole community burns down around me, I'm not going to be happy. I'm not going to want to live there. And none of us would. So I really feel like a communication that says we live in a fire dependent landscape. Fires will happen. They are not unlikely to happen outside of a lot of different communities, and every community needs to be prepared to receive fire. And I'm just looking for advice on how to make that message more palatable,
Well,
more.
we'll bring you back, I promise. Let's make sure we get to Robert Vitale's question. Is the CAL FIRE defensible space assessment done by volunteer defensible space assessors going to be included in the data sets? This is a current CAL FIRE program.
Yes, I have talked to Jim McDougald. He's been a big part of our, from CAL FIRE, I'm sorry, a big part of our phase 2. And I guess he wouldn't mind me saying this. He would like for their data to go into the WUI Data Commons. He wants everything CAL FIRE does to get as much traction as possible for all the modelers, all the insurers. And so I am hoping that if we make it feasible for their inspection software to pass our data spec, then it won't matter if it's volunteers or not volunteers. If the technology shows you what the volunteers did, then the tech took care of the problem. I don't think we need super expensive people to do this. I mean, they have to know what they're doing, but I think it could be NFPA people if they wanted to. I mean, I think my husband could go up and down the street and inspect 20 homes in an afternoon, if the neighbors let him and didn't shoot him.
Yeah, so generous of you. So we're almost at time. You've been, of course, great, and much appreciated. The last question that from Gary that I would love to just touch on, because you do have the ear of a number of insurers. And this is you and I talked a little bit about this. The new CAL FIRE wildland risk maps came out. People, are concerned about, well, how does it, are insurers going to use these maps to further isolate me and, charge me more. And we kind of, my understanding, and, Oregon's been going around the block on this. The legislature had to pass a law because people got so upset, that expressly said insurance companies cannot use these public maps. And now there's an effort to stop having the government do the mapping, which I think, crazy, because that's how you figure out where to allocate resources. Can you confirm, Nancy, my understanding that insurance companies are using their own mapping and the data they're buying, they are not waiting around for the CAL FIRE maps, and they're not basing their underwriting and pricing decisions on those maps. Is that true or not true?
Well, you can never get an actuary to answer a yes or no question. Sorry, but I would be totally shocked if now any insurance company was using CAL FIRE zones in underwriting or pricing or anything. Now, it's possible that years and years and years ago, that was like a really rough way of just, being lazy, and that's how you did your territories. But no company that's actively writing wildfire exposed risk would rely on those. And I am thrilled that Orinda made it onto the very high hazard zone yesterday, because now when CDI updates their distressed areas, hopefully we will be feeling more distressed, and we will count for the insurance companies that are having to commit to market share metrics in order to, meet the sustainable insurance strategy requirements to file with cap models and reinsurance. They'll get a, they'll be able to count our policies even if we're not in the FAIR plan. So I really think you're right. The maps are for managing state resources, and insurance companies, no responsible insurance company would bet a huge amount of capital just using maps that are so huge and so undifferentiated.
Yeah. Well, that's a great note to close on, because I think, we try to learn from other people's experiences and hope we're not going to repeat that same kind of political tug of war here in California. So getting the accurate information out there early and often will be, I think, to everyone's benefit. Nancy, thank you so much. And to all of you, we have roughly sketched out to have our next meeting in, let's see, what did I say, Ben? April, I think I said the 8th. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes, April 8th.
So put a hold on your calendar for April 8th. I want to say thank you so much, Nancy Watkins, and to you and Taylor, your team, for all the important work that you've been doing all these years to advance the WUI Data Commons project. It definitely is something I think deserves a lot of support. Very concrete. And we look forward to sharing your slides with all of you who joined us today. We hope you'll come back, Nancy, for our next meeting and beyond, so we can keep all this good dialoguing and connections going. So with that, that's a wrap.